This is On Assignment.
VOA News.
VOA News.
Hey everyone, I'm Imran Siddiqui here with Alex Villarreal, and we're taking you on assignment.
Our first spotlight is on Syria. We'll talk to our reporter who got personal accounts of the crackdown from those seeking safety in Jordan.
You learn how VOA uses crowdsourcing to cover the tragic story of rape in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We'll introduce you to the masterminds behind VOA's trendy weekly tech show To Iran.
And how Cambodians are reclaiming their history.
This is your VOA Backstage Pass. You're watching On Assignment.
Syrian towns under fire. Take a look at this video activists posted on YouTube. You can hear the gunfire in the back.
Of course, Imran, amateur videos like this one we're seeing can't be independently verified, but you are going to introduce us to one VOA correspondent who's been getting the story from the front line.
That's true. His name is Scott Bob. He was in Jordan, and he talked to Syrians fleeing the fighting.
Khalaf Ershaidat and Khalid Ghizawi have lived in this apartment provided by a Jordanian benefactor for the past 2 months. They say they fled Syria after being wounded by government troops and asked that their identities be hidden. Ershaidat, not his real name, was an interior decorator in Daraa, southern Syria. He says he was shot during an anti-government demonstration, and then in a hospital, authorities tortured him.
They wanted me to confess that I was part of a terrorist organization related to Al-Qaeda and to say that the people who tortured us were terrorists from Al-Qaeda. And this is not true.
And now let's talk to Scott Bob, who's in Jerusalem right now. He just returned from the Jordanian-Syrian border. Some of the guys in the interview said they were being forced by the Syrian government to brand themselves as a part of some terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda. How much truth is there to that?
This is the line that the Syrian government has taken, that this is not a rebellion by the Syrian people, but it's something that's foreign, that's terrorist-based, and so forth. And these people, to me, all denied that.
Now, you also had a chance to talk to Dr. Vasi Al-Rasi from the privately owned Irbit hospital.
In this hospital, I can take care of 1, 2, 3, 4 patients for free, but the number of refugees is so big, and this hospital is not supported by the government. So it's important that humanitarian groups, local or international, help out like in any humanitarian emergency.
Where are the international or local humanitarian organizations?
This is a good question. They're few and far between at this stage. And my view is that it's because the refugee situation has not attained the crisis proportions like we're used to seeing in war zones in Africa and other parts of the world. And as always, there is a time lag before groups start to come. They are starting, but up until now, the Jordanian government has been taking the most seriously wounded into the public hospitals and trying to find shelter for those who have none.
Kusai Zubi is a mechanic who arrived last week with a gunshot wound to his thigh. He says government brutality in Syria is getting worse.
They are shooting people just because of Bashar al-Assad, because of Iran. They were slaughtering us. They were shooting in all directions, children, women, men, unarmed people, from their cars, from their motorcycles.
He said that this is because of Iran. Why did he talk about Iran? How does Iran fit into this picture?
Well, what people are saying is that Iran supports the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and supports some groups in Lebanon, Hezbollah to name one, and that Iran has been funneling arms and is helping to train the Syrian government forces.
The people that you had a chance to interview, the Syrian nationals, these guys would want to go back home.
These people would like to go home, but they say Syrian forces consider wounded civilians to be traitors, and as a result, they will be killed if they return.
If you, as a civilian, go back to Syria and say you have a bandage, or you're walking on crutches, or you have a severed hand, as occurred in the video, then you are considered to have opposed the regime and can be taken in and tortured and questioned, and that's their fear.
But Scott, what about the women and children? I mean, a little boy who's like 6, 7 years old, he's got a bandage around his knee or around his elbow. How can he be branded as a traitor?
There are reports that the government forces have been killing children in these cities that they're retaking, entire families, because they're viewed as rebels or resistance or terrorists, and they're punishing entire communities for the resistance of some. So a child that may have been hit by a bit of shrapnel, would then come under suspicion, I suspect. Again, we have to remember that their media organizations are not allowed to operate in Syria without extreme government supervision. Even humanitarian organizations are being prevented from reaching these, what I would call war zones now. And so it's hard to confirm all of this. So we're going by testimonies, but there's a lot of testimony that matches, that is the same stories coming from different parts of the country. And so this is what tends to be incriminating against the Syrian government.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time. We wish you good luck. Stay safe out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's time now for a break, but Imran, they want to keep watching because just after this, we hear from VOA's Swahili service chief.
He'll fill us in on a unique reporting project shedding light on crimes in the Congo. You're watching On Assignment.
This is the Voice of America.
Take a picture for a It was extended.
VOA Special English, a way to learn American English and much more. Broadcasting news and features around the world on radio, television, and on the web at voaspecialenglish.com. For 50 years, helping people understand world events and the language and culture of America.
Rape has been used as a weapon of war in the Democratic Republic of Congo for years.
Women, girls, and even men have often struggled in silence. But VOA is helping to change that with a special website giving victims and other viewpoints a voice. Let's take a look.
This girl is 5 years old. We will call her Teresa because her doctor asked us not to use rape victims' names. Her mom says before she was raped, Teresa could walk and play. Now, most of her body is paralyzed.
What you just saw was a VOA report by Heather Murdoch on the rape crisis plaguing the Democratic Republic of Congo. Joining me now is the chief of VOA Swahili service, Wamoyo Hamza. You know, the Africa division covers so many different issues across the continent, from famine to AIDS to war. What has made its coverage of this crisis in the Congo different?
This time we decided we are going to partner with Citizen Global. Citizen Global is a crowdsourcing media which offers a unique platform whereby people can go and share their testimonies. The rape crisis continues in Congo, even long after the war.
And the statistics are really extremely staggering. There was a study that came out last year that said there were 400,000 women a year being raped. That made more than 1,000 women a day, 48 women an hour.
The crime of rape is a crime that kind of lives in secrecy. So the more people who are raped, they don't feel good coming out. And that happens a lot. In 2010, for instance, a group of Congolese soldiers went to a village, closed off the village, and raped women for about 4 or 5 days.
Dr. Endana Zawadi says unmarried girls that get pregnant from rape are often rejected by their families, along with their child born of rape. Sex before marriage is considered shameful in this conservative country, and abortion is not an option, legally or socially.
Même la famille elle-même n'est pas d'accord avec ça, même la société n'est pas d'accord avec ça. Surtout que au village, on respecte la virginité.
We need to keep this story going. We need to put it in a place where people can see it all the time.
Well, can you go ahead and show us the site? We have it up right here on the screen behind you. If you could just direct us and show us what you're featuring here.
Yeah, if we go on the screen here, we have our featured story, whereby our VOA reporters are reporting on the story itself on video and all other kind of platforms. And then when we go here, we see people who are speaking out on what they have learned about the story, what they have experienced. And let's go ahead and watch this.
The Democratic Republic of Congo.
Over 200,000 women have been raped.
It could be your mother.
Your daughter.
On this section, we have the history of the Congo political situation and the background to how rape became a weapon of war.
These teenage girls were abducted by militias in the Congolese countryside when they were as young as 13. The babies are the children of their rapists. Kidnapped in the forest or during raids on villages, girls say they were beaten and used as cooks, porters, spies, servants, and sometimes combatants. More often than not, they were also used as bushwives, a euphemism for sexual slaves.
We have had testimonies and content from different groups of people from all over the world.
Rape is the new weapon of war.
The Geneva Conventions recognizes sexual violence as a crime against humanity.
This cannot continue. This cannot continue. This cannot continue.
This cannot continue.
This cannot continue.
Personally, for you, how have you seen this sort of surge in citizen journalism and in participation? How has that helped you be able to tell stories like this?
The interactive itself gives you more depth into stories. Instead of just telling the people of Congo what is happening in Congo, we are cooperating with the people of Congo in telling the story of Congo. And people are really participating because they feel that they're part of the story. They feel that they're not only being addressed to, but they're addressing the story themselves.
Well, thank you, Hamza. We really appreciate you joining us today. And if you would like to know more about VOA's Congo project, you can check it out on voacongostory.com. Imran, I just want to note that since we shot that segment, the Congo Story website has gotten a fresh new look. So for those of you who visit, know that things may look a little different, but you're still getting all the same content.
Alex, it's interesting that you say that because it just goes out to show how technology is constantly changing around the world. And I talked to two hosts for VOA's Persian News Network who are showcasing exactly that. Let's check it out. And I'm standing here with Rouge and Hamid of the Persian News Network, that's PNN, and we're going to be talking about their show, which is a tech show, and it's called 2.0 Do Nokta Sef. That's 2.0 in Persian. Persia or Iran has always, in the past, been known for technological advancements like geography, mathematics, and all that. Is the audience in Persia or Iran still interested in science and technology?
Well, based on what we know from our audience, our show has been very well received during the past 80 weeks that we've been producing it. So I think the short answer is yes.
In one of your shows, you guys covered robots playing soccer. What was that all about?
There is a very serious league called the League of Robots, or Robocop. It's a show where different universities around the world participate in.
And we also talked with someone from inside the country. They didn't want their names to be mentioned or be in front of the camera because of all the sensitivities, and they were one of the participants, major participants of the RoboCop. So they gave us a lot of information about what's going on inside the country.
What about this project that you guys did in Uganda? And then someone also came up and supported
Sure.
you guys. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was actually very interesting because I was in Uganda for a relatively personal trip, and we journalists usually carry our cameras wherever we go. So I had my camera, and I realized that instead of doing a very high-tech story, I can actually do a story on low-tech solutions inside Uganda. For example, converting biomass to biofuel, or using solar energy to improve the daily lives of people, because most people in Uganda, even in Kampala, don't have access to electricity or to actual gas. So they use wood stoves, or they use solar panels if they have the money. So I was at this orphanage, and the guy who was running the orphanage mentioned that he pushed the government to bring electricity to the village that the orphanage was in. And after a lot of noise, the government was able to bring electricity right next to the village, but not to the village. So in order to get electricity to the village, they needed about $5,000. And after the report aired, about 2 weeks later, I got contacted by a gentleman in Canada, saying that I saw the story, I'm not really tech savvy, but I like the story, I have $5,000. Put me in touch with this person, I'm willing to give them the money. So we put them in touch, they gave them the money. Now, because of this report, about 250 kids in that orphanage would have access to electricity.
Anyone planning to walk along all of these aisles faces a 15-mile trip.
When we talk about Vegas, you were covering the Consumer Electronics Show, but what happened there? I mean, you can share that.
We can't talk about it.
What stays in Vegas, you gotta stay in Vegas.
It's geeks' heaven, so
okay.
For geeks, it's a big party.
I see a separation. Consumer Electronics Show is an annual show which takes place, as you mentioned, in Vegas.
1.3 megapixels, and it also does record in HD.
It's a very shiny show that different companies contribute to showcase their gadgets. The main theme in 2012 show was about connectivity. So even your small gadgets to your televisions, everything would be able to connect to each other and connect to internet.
People in Iran, they use technology, right? They are internet savvy and they have these gadgets.
Well, there's a very famous street in Tehran, and other metropolitan cities in Iran have it. It's basically a city filled with stores that offer the latest gadgets. And there are actual complexes that are technology complexes, basically a bazaar of gadgets that you go to and you find the latest chip, latest processor, latest media card that you want. Everything is available for people inside the country. Smartphone use is on the rise inside the country. We know about 1 million people inside the country at least have Android phones. iPhone is very expensive, but people do have them. So people in general are very, very tech savvy.
Yeah, and you have 20,000 plus fans on your Facebook page.
Yeah.
But if people want to watch you guys, what's the best way to catch you?
Well, we've done different tests to see whether the satellite broadcast has a larger impact or our Facebook page. We've realized that the satellite component has a much wider reach inside the country. Our Facebook page has a more condensed population of tech-savvy people, because whoever goes to our Facebook page has to already pass a lot of filters. And if they want to go to our Facebook page, that means they really want to hear about the latest technology news.
Arash and Hamid, you guys can catch them on PNN, that's Persian News Network. The name of the show is 2.0, and that's Do Nukta Sef. You're watching On Assignment.
It's time for another break. Coming up, we see how Cambodia is healing more than 30 years after the reign of the Khmer Rouge. You are on assignment.
VOA reporters are at work finding stories around the world. For example, this week in Bethesda, Maryland, VOA's Susan Logue found the classic children's story Pinocchio being updated in a very modern way.
Pinocchio, a hip-hop musical, is the creation of Psalmayeni 24, or Psalm for short.
For some reason, Pinocchio has always resonated with me. I work with a hip-hop aesthetic, and I thought that the story really lent itself to that type of interpretation.
Oh, but something still isn't quite right.
Pinocchio has been so popular, it's traveling before returning to the D.C. area.
I guess this is what it took for me to give up telling lies.
Susan Logue, VOA News, Bethesda, Maryland.
They were dark days for Cambodia, the 1970s, when some 1.7 million people died under Khmer Rouge rule.
The effects of those atrocities still linger, as VOA's Bangkok correspondent Daniel Scharf found out when he traveled to Cambodia.
A lot of the stories that you did, so many of them focused on how Cambodians are working to preserve their history and culture. And of course, when you talk about Cambodian history, you can't help but think about the atrocities committed by the Khmer Rouge. And you actually spoke with one of the survivors from one of the Khmer Rouge prisons. How did you meet him?
Yeah, that's Chiang Mai. He's one of only 2 living survivors now. There were 3 still living. One of them, Van Nath, an artist, just passed away just last year.
Teacher Sa Sayana stands before a classroom of foreigners and tries to cover in 15 minutes the violent history of Cambodia's Khmer Rouge. She says the course, sponsored by the Documentation Center of Cambodia, has added weight because it is held in a historic site. The Khmer Rouge locked up as many as 20,000 Cambodians here, deemed enemies of the revolution. Only 7 survived. The rest were tortured and executed. Chiang Mai, one of only 2 living survivors of Tuol Sleng, now works at his former prison, selling books about the Khmer Rouge. He welcomes the classes, but says more education is needed.
This is not enough. There must be many more classes, so young people will understand. Once they understand, they will not follow in the footsteps of the Khmer Rouge.
Chiang Mai he's a fixture at Tuol Sleng prison. Actually, he goes there to work, and he's selling books right now to make a living, and also magazines that talk about his biography. He also was very excited to tell us that there's a journalist who's going to be writing a book about him, so he'll soon have his own book that he can sell rather than other books about the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot.
And getting from Thailand to Cambodia, what's that travel like, and did you have to go through any sort of remote regions?
Well, we flew direct from Bangkok to Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, and then we did some driving around. And for one of the stories that we worked on, concerning the 2 statues, we did do some driving up into some rather remote area. The roads could be a little bit bumpy, that sort of thing, and but it was still there were roads anyway, so it wasn't as bad as some places I've been to.
Now, that story that you're talking about, the story about the stolen statues, how did it come about that you came across that issue?
It seemed there was a French colonial law that was being invoked by the Cambodian government in order to try and come up with some kind of legal precedent for why these statues needed to be returned. The statues had actually been, one statue in particular was going to be auctioned off by Sotheby's auction house in New York last year. But that was canceled after complaints by Cambodian authorities.
This view that you showed us, which I thought was so remarkable to see, of just the feet remaining of these statues. Can you talk about what it was like to be there?
Yeah, this is Khao Kai is a very this is the name of the temple complex that we traveled to about 3 hours northeast of Siem Reap. And it's a fairly remote area. It's not as touristy as the Angkor Wat area, where you have thousands of tourists every day. Khao Kai, in contrast, you only have a handful of tourists going there every day. It takes some a bit of a road trip to get out there, and it doesn't have as much infrastructure, so it doesn't attract quite the same numbers. But it was very remarkable to be in the ruins of this ancient temple that. Where the bases of these 2 statues were located.
Well, thank you, Daniel. We really appreciate all the reporting that you did and the insights that you shared with us today. If you want to check out Daniel's stories, you can visit us at voanews.com and search Daniel Scharf. Thank you, Daniel.
My pleasure.
And now in our full feature story, VOA's Greg Flakus in Texas tells us about a new U.S. opera highlighting the experiences of Iranian exiles.
The production at the Houston Grand Opera is called The Bricklayer. The opera's story is the work of Iranian-American writer Farnoosh Moshiri, who left Iran herself in the 1980s. Let's take a look.
Even in last-minute rehearsals on a bare stage, the power of the bricklayer's story comes through, as well as the sadness at its core. This opera tells of one family's suffering, the son executed in Iran, the father tortured so badly he is left mentally disabled. His part is sung by Houston Opera veteran John Colbert. Author Farnoosh Moshiri, who left Iran in 1983 and makes Houston her home, says the story will be familiar to many Iranians who escaped repression and had to start a new life in a foreign country.
Resilience and hope can take people through hardships, and the solidarity of the family members with each other. Many families had such traumatic experience.
But she says exiles from other countries will also identify with the story of this family.
Not only exiles from Iran, but exiles from any other dictatorial regime that they leave their country for good. It's a universal story.
Composer Gregory Spears worked with Moshiri to put The Bricklayer to music.
I think Greg has done a fabulous job of using my words, using my language for the purpose of the opera.
Farnoosh has both very powerful stories, but she also has a very clear, straightforward, but also poetic style of writing.
Houston Grand Opera's artistic and music director, Patrick Summers, says this work reflects the city's diverse ethnic and cultural communities, using music as the common language.
We very much want, as a leading American arts company, to be a company that tells the story of our own city. In opera, music leads the dramatic pulse. And The Bricklayer is very successful at that.
This is one of several new works being developed by Houston Grand Opera as part of its Song of Houston East plus West program, which celebrates the city as a meeting place for people from Eastern and Western cultures. Greg Flakus, VOA News, Houston.
Meeting place for Eastern and Western culture. That sounds like our show on Assignment.
Very much kind of like us.
Kind of like us, East and the West, but sadly the show is coming to an end.
It has, but don't worry, because we'll be back next week when On Assignment takes you to Pakistan to see efforts there to eradicate polio.
In the meantime, you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter anytime and catch up on our past episodes on YouTube.
From the VOA Visitor Center in Washington, this is On Assignment.